Welcome to the Legendarium Green Team. I'm Befuddled Panda, a first-time host, and joining me today we have the ever-grateful Little Red Book,
Hi, everyone.
the quick-witted Kiptan,
Hey, yo, guys.
and joining us for the first time, we have Yeti Beats.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Thank you for joining us. So today we are talking about books within the fantasy and science fiction genres with female protagonists that we think are good role models and that we would recommend. We will section this episode by intended audience categories, starting with children's books and working our way to books for adults. That's not to say older audiences can't enjoy books intended for younger audiences and vice versa, to a degree. For each category, we will go through the panelists one by one to give their recommendations. Due to the number of recommendations we have to talk about, we are actually splitting this episode into two. So in this episode, we will cover recommendations for audience categories of children's through young teens. So that's about through age 14. In the other episode, we will cover teens YA through adult, so about age 15 and above. We will keep the recommendations as spoiler-free as possible. I do want to give a quick shout out to Eridandis. Hopefully I said that right. I'm so sorry if I butchered it. Who is a Legendarium podcast listener. He was the one who gave us the idea for these episodes. They were talking about, in Discord, book recommendations with female protagonists for their daughter. And it was such a fruitful discussion, we thought we would do a podcast about it, or at least an episode or two. All right. So for our first category, it's children's. I've defined this as under the age of 8. So I can go ahead and start us off. So my first recommendation is called Zeta the Space Girl series. It's by Ben Hatke. I'm not really sure how to pronounce his last name. But it's good for children starting age 7. It's a graphic novel series, and the description is that, I think it's female protagonists don't have to be just princesses. This is a cute sci-fi graphic novel series featuring Zeta, a space girl who goes on an adventure to save her best friend, who's been abducted by an alien doomsday cult. And why I recommend this series is because it is fun and cute. It's sci-fi. It's a story about friendship and redemption, and it also has a lot of whimsical elements like humanoid chickens and neurotic robots.
You had me at Alien Doomsday Cult.
Right?
It's pretty fantastic. Yeah. And the art is very, very cute. So very good for young audiences.
That's like the murder robot. She had me at murder robot.
Which is not for younger audiences.
No.
That's
Sorry.
nice, yeah.
Yeah. So how about Little Red? Would you like to go next?
So I'm going to recommend 3 folktales, Hansel and Gretel, and Rapunzel, and a lesser-known one called The 7 Ravens. In all of these stories, the female character is the hero. So Gretel kills the witch, and all the guys are just stupid window dressing. Like, they don't do anything. And The 7 Ravens is about a girl who rescues her brothers who've been cursed because she failed to bring they failed to bring baptismal water to her. She has to cut off her pinky to save them. And then Rapunzel, in some versions of the story, has to escape the tower herself, and she has to rescue the prince who is blind and wandering in a forest while taking care of twins. So, spoilers for Rapunzel.
Oh my goodness, severed pinkies. I mean, I'm in.
Brothers
These
Grimm.
ladies they're badass ladies, I'm telling you. Oh, first swear, sorry.
I do really like the version where Rapunzel is the one that is saving the prince. And it doesn't just end with like, oh, the prince coming to the tower.
Right.
And, my daughter watches a lot of Disney. So, like, her Rapunzel is just Tangled. So it's nice, like, actual folklores. I'd wish she'd read some of these just so it'd be, not that they're super dark, but it's, it's not just it's a fighting horse, and which I love
I
Tangled.
mean, the original version of Little Mermaid is pretty dark.
Yeah,
There's a version of Red Riding Hood where she escapes the wolf herself by saying she's gonna poop in the bed, so the wolf better let her get out of the house. That's how she escapes.
Never heard that version before.
Oh, I wrote a paper on it. I could
Oh
send it
my
to you
gosh.
sometime.
Yeah, send it my way.
that's exactly what I would do in her situation.
All right.
Where's that kind of fantasy? When did that go out of style?
I was just gonna say, I feel like kids back in the day, it's a little
Was it for
tougher.
kids?
Oh, it wasn't.
No.
Oh dear. Okay. Kip, do you have any recs for children?
You know what? I just thought of one based off of your recommendation, so I'm going to go with it. It's a graphic novel / webcomic called Gunner Craig Court, and it's all about these two friends who are at this weird boarding school for some reason, very different reasons. And one of them is more drawn towards the technological aspects of the boarding school, which has like a whole bunch of robots and crazy science experiments going on.
Nice.
And the other is more drawn to things across the river from the boarding school. There's like this big chasm and river called the Annan Waters, which separates it from basically a magical forest ruled over by the god Coyote. And she feels more of an affinity with the forest creatures and the fantastical elements. And there's even like a few exchange students from the forest in the boarding school, in the court. And it's fun to see the differences in both like the attitudes of the fantastical people who have problems adapting to concrete rules of like, you can't just want something and have it happen.
Right.
You you have to like, work towards it or build a machine or do something, and it's interesting. But it's really the relationship between the two girls that's center to the whole thing. And not just like the girls themselves, but also you start to unravel like the backstories of their parents and their relationships and like the drama of, oh, your teacher used to like my mom.
Oh.
But it's a fun story, and although the art starts off a little rough, it's gotten really good since the early days.
So,
Red?
quick question. Could this be
Yeah.
enjoyed by adults as well? Or like something you could read with your kid and enjoy it?
I do. Yeah. Like I enjoy it. I read it every week.
I feel like that message of having to work for something to get what you want and kind of trying to repeat that over and over to kids, it's definitely going to come up in this discussion later on with the book. I know someone else is bringing up that I wanted to bring up. But I can't stress how important that is. Like I said, we'll be
And
talking about that.
and it's a combination of both, because one of them is like a roboticist who works really hard to do all the things she wants, but maybe she loses sight of like maybe the more human elements of emotion and connection in her like drive to get one of her goals done. And maybe the one who's more built up the relationship with the forest maybe loses track of how people with a more logical mindset might look at her actions, and how childlike people might think that they are driven by emotion. It's a character study. It's good.
All the best books are.
All right. Moving to Yeti. What's your recommendation?
Yeah, so I messaged you guys not long ago that this one just kind of popped into my head while I was like doing dishes earlier. It's Matilda by Ronald Dahl, and I haven't read it in forever, but it's always had a lasting impression on me, just based on a lot of the things that I took from it. Um, I'm sure people have at least seen the movie. Matilda has poor family in her life, has a nasty teacher, has telekinetic powers, I believe.
Hmm.
And just things, that stuck with me was like how important love is in your life. She's not getting it from her parents, so to speak, but she has a very important teacher, I believe is Miss Honey. The importance it put on just knowledge and intelligence, kind of like what Kip was saying before. The bad characters in this book are all kind of looked down on Matilda because she's smarter. Her teacher, and they're kind of not as educated, so to speak. And also
Yeah.
the importance in, which I always love, in reading and books. Because I think there's even, they deride television in this book, saying get out, stop wasting time with television, which I think this book was written in like 1970. Television's come a bit farther than it was back then. So it's nothing wrong with watching Mad Men, I would say. But I just think there's so many good values in this book. The art is hit or miss. I know my daughter; she's kind of a wuss. She probably wouldn't like it, and she think it's weird and odd and strange. But I think it's kind of endearing. It's unique. So, but I can't speak enough to that book, and I just think you can get so much out of it, and hopefully kids can too. I mean, I might be way off. They might just be like, they like when the kid eats too much cake. At least in the movie, that's what I like.
No, I agree. It's a very good children's classic. I both enjoy the book, the film, and the musical adaptation.
I didn't even know there was a musical until until I was thinking about it today, and I googled a short recap because again, it's been like 20 years since I've watched the movie tons of times. And I saw there was a musical, and I was embarrassed I've never seen it.
I've never heard of it either. So
It's fairly recent, so
Okay.
Yeah.
but I would recommend listening to the soundtrack.
You don't have to twist
Spotify
my
plays
arm.
it for me a lot.
Nice.
show tunes that Kip listens to.
I'll jump on that
Yep.
podcast.
Okay, so I have two more children's category recommendations, which this next one is like a bit younger. So it's called Pages and Co. and it's a series right now. The first book is Tilly and the Book Wanderers, and the second book is Tilly and the Lost Fairy Tales. So I'll just give a quick synopsis of the first book. It's about 11-year-old Tilly who lives with her grandparents in their bookshop. They're all avid readers, and then one day Tilly overhears her grandmother having a conversation with someone in the bookshop. That's how Tilly finds out about the magic of book wandering, which is where fictional characters are able to cross over from the pages into real life and vice versa. And I recommend this because for Tilly, she's also wrestling with the loss of her mother. Her mother just one day disappeared and she doesn't know why. And she's also trying to find her place in the world. She encounters quite a few dangers that give her the opportunity to exercise courage. And I think it's a fun one for parents to read with their children, especially because it helps introduce the kids to other literary works. So examples would be like Anne of Green Gables, Alice in Wonderland, that kind of stuff. And also, I mean, I would love to be able to book wander. That would be so cool.
Who wouldn't?
I mean, it's
Well,
almost like Mary Poppins, right? Going into the street paintings.
yeah, that's a very good comparison. And you have to be careful about where you choose to go.
Of course.
Isn't that like the movie The Page Master with Macaulay Culkin? Didn't
Oh
he
my
jump
God,
in?
yes.
Oh no.
Yeah, as a Page Master fan.
Oh, of course. That's what it
I have
reminded me
never
of.
heard of that movie.
It's different.
Okay. What you would recommend? You wouldn't
It's
recommend?
about a boy who gets transported into a book with like 3 book guides, like fantasy, horror, and adventure,
Interesting.
I would
and
recommend maybe
has to find
watching
his way back out.
I was just going to say, I would recommend maybe watching the Nostalgia Critics video on the Page Master versus actually watching the Page Master
Okay.
myself. Can I recommend one more book for the littles?
Sure.
I'm going to recommend Alice in Wonderland. It's a lot of fun. It's crazy. I never read it until I was an adult, but it's kids' imagination is it just fits right into that slot. All the weird things that go on, all the wordplay, and Alice is clever and wonderful.
So, for someone I've never read the book, is it similar to the movie almost exactly? Is it a little more
So the
weird?
movie is a combination between Alice in Wonderland and Alice Through the Looking Glass. So the Red Queen is in Alice Through the Looking Glass. She's not in Alice in Wonderland.
Okay.
I think the Cheshire Cat is in Alice in Wonderland. The Caterpillar definitely is. I don't remember. It's been a while since I've read it, but it's been probably like 10 years.
But it's similar in tone and also weird.
Yeah,
because
very much in tone for sure.
Very, very weird. And also, the Jabberwocky is not in the Disney version
No,
of the story.
no.
So probably because it would have been too scary. I don't know.
It was
for the children.
Jabberwocky.
Yeah, in quotes, too scary.
Some children.
He's definitely scary.
It's okay.
I'm
Those
also-
Vorpal blades go snicker snack.
I'm also of the belief that you should not read things that aren't scary to kids, because life is scary. And I think a really big part, especially like the folktales I mentioned, those are really scary. Like the idea of your mom not actually being your mom and having kidnapped you and locked you in a tower.
Yeah.
But it helps you cope with the bad things in life.
Yeah. Well, I'll pony off that. You're exactly right. I mean, it's, at least in my experience, kids go into everything saying that, there's not real bad guys out there, or, my daughter just said, people don't die till they're 100. I'm like, I guess we have to watch Land Before Time again. God. So it is like you're exactly right. Books are such a good gateway to introduce them into touchy subjects and do that stuff.
I have a book recommendation that's like just edging out of children, maybe into like earlier teen material.
Okay.
Maybe
Maybe.
because it's not super dark. It's not horrible, but it does definitely have some references to either possible horrors or to historical horrors. Specifically, there's some references to an analog of the Holocaust.
Okay.
And it's being told from a Jewish girl's point of view, and her grandfather is basically at various points throughout the book saying, "Be careful. These are our escape mechanisms in case things turn bad here too." And the book is Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. It's a retelling of Rumpelstiltskin from the point of view of a young Jewish girl. And it's fantastical. It's strangely grounded in the real world with like, for example, Jewish usury laws, or however you say that word. Never actually
Usury.
used it in real life. Usury laws.
That's okay. I'll mispronounce something later.
Yeah. And it's about a girl who spins silver into more silver, and how that maybe captures the attention of a fairy lord.
Got it. Okay, so I've heard of the book. I've just never really paid attention to the synopsis. So now I'm even more intrigued to read this book.
It's very interesting. A little girl comes up from, her father is a horrible moneylender, and one day she decides, okay, I just have to take over here. Her father is too nice, and maybe she becomes a little too cold.
Got it.
And that's the central part of the story. There's a lot more to it. But lessons about how to connect with people, how to have debts to people, how to manage debts, how to not crush people with debts, and how to find love, how to remember who you are. Lots of good messages. Red or Yeti?
You can go, Red.
Oh, I was just going to say, so forgiveness is part of it too. I would guess, from what you're talking
Oh,
about.
absolutely.
Mm.
Have you read Uprooted?
I have not read Uprooted. No,
I was wondering how it compared, because I've read Uprooted, but I haven't read Spinning Silver.
it's on my TBR. I have heard from people who have read both that they like Spinning Silver more, but that's anecdotal.
Yeah.
I've read Uprooted and I wasn't a fan, so that's why I was hesitant to read Spinning Silver. But the Spinning Silver sounds way more interesting to me.
I have a really funny story about Uprooted that I will tell you after we're done recording.
Sounds good.
Green Team After Dark.
Yeah, or like join us on Discord if you want the other stories that we're not telling here. Does anybody else have other recommendations? Otherwise, I have one last one for this category.
Yeah, I'm just going to put in a really quick one. I don't have too much
Sure.
to say about it, but I read the DC Superhero Girls graphic novels to my daughter. And this is anecdotal, but I love them because she's a girl who loves boy stuff, and she thinks that boys are one way and girls are the other. Like, girls can only like dolls, girls can only, do quote unquote girly things. So this book has been so great to see not only that girls are powerful and cool and witty, but funny and goofy and just everything, just a wide variety because there's so many different superheroes. Obviously, they put in these books, and just that in general to show, because I'm going nuts over how. And I'm not steering away from boy things. Boy things are cool too, but it's like everyone's different, and like someone can be goofy, not just someone can be smart, not just someone with glasses. So this I really like them, and they have cool lessons.
I disagree. Glasses definitely make you smarter. As I say while I put on my glasses. I'm just joking, Eddie.
All right, my last recommendation for the children's category is it's kind of like at the upper age range for children's. It's called Ella Enchanted by Gail Carson Levine, which was pretty popular like a couple decades ago. But this is a Cinderella retelling with a twist. Ella of Frel was cursed at birth by the well-meaning fairy Lucinda. She didn't mean to curse her, but ended up doing so. Ella's curse is that she is obedient, meaning she must obey any command that any person gives her. Instead of pitying herself or becoming a docile girl, Ella grows to be a feisty rebel. When someone finds out about Ella's curse, they take advantage of it and puts the prince of the kingdom at risk. And Ella is going to have to do some stuff to save the prince. So why I recommend this is, well, first, full disclosure, this is my favorite childhood book. But Ella is a strong female protagonist role model. And this is my kind of fairy tale where Ella doesn't rely on a man to save herself. She is resourceful, strong-willed, and not a jerk about it. This was my first reading experience that made me realize how much a book could impact me. Specifically, how a book can elicit such strong emotions from a reader. And even though this book was published in the late 90s, I think it still holds up today.
Absolutely. I love Ella Enchanted. It's a great book. I was happy
I
to
have-
see it on your recommendation list.
Yeah, I
Thank
haven't
you.
read it, so I don't know.
I've
Oh,
only
you
seen
should
the
read
movie,
it.
but it's a classic.
Definitely
I mean,
read the book.
the movie has Anne Hathaway singing "Can anybody find me somebody to love?" So it's on my list.
More show tunes with Kip.
Yep.
I would say I know the movie gets a lot of crap, but it is meant for a younger audience and it's a bit cheesy. But the movie for itself, like I think is really fun, even as a fan of the book itself. Like I kind of see them as separate things. And I enjoy the book for what it is, and I enjoy the movie for what it is.
Who's putting down the movie? I want their address, background info.
I mean, if we're talking about female protagonists in retellings of movies, I have to talk about Roger and Hammerstein's retelling of Cinderella with Brandy, Whoopi
Oh
my
Goldberg,
God.
Whitney Houston. That was an excellent one.
Oh yeah.
I remember that. Now I want to rewatch it.
I was just going to say, I'm just going to toss in Wizard of Oz just for another great female protagonist. Dorothy's fabulous and clever and wonderful.
Mhm.
So that's all I have to say about that.
Eddie, did you have something?
No, I was just thinking we're all going to be watching late '90s, early 2000s nostalgia movies.
No,
No, no.
because
I
I
mean-
am so much older than you guys.
I've already
Another
been,
night.
so
Another
not,
night.
not new for me. Kip.
I mean, we could talk about Twitches by Tia and Tamara Mowry, but
Okay, now we're getting off topic.
I don't know, still female protagonists in fantasy.
Yeah.
That is true, but they're not books anymore. Actually, I wouldn't be
True.
surprised if there were books about them. There probably
Oh,
are,
geez.
knowing Disney.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on to our next category, which is middle grade, which is the age of 8 to 12. Would anybody want to start us off here?
Sure. Though I want to start off with a disclaimer.
Okay.
I am purposefully not mentioning any books by Tamora Pierce because I do that all the time. Even though I could only talk about Tamora Pierce series for the rest of this episode.
Good. We could.
You could.
Yep, I totally could. If I have a blanket recommendation for all the Tamora Pierce books. I have suggested reading orders and starting books pinned in the Discord. Okay. Oh, and we have a bi-weekly reading club going through all of them. But the series that I chose for younger teen, middle age is the Young Wizard series by Diane Duane. It tells the story of Nita Callahan, a young bookworm who lives in the suburb of NYC. One day she finds a book entitled So You Want to Be a Wizard that promises to make her a wizard if she'll swear an oath to protect life. I love the series for the number and breadth of topics it discusses, including autism, grief and death, resettlement choice, dinosaurs, pollution, and interstellar malls and shopping channels.
Oh my goodness.
There's gay role models who can sell you a couple extra hours of weekend, while their oracular macaw gives you tips on the weather. There's giant metal centipedes that manage a galactic travel hub. There's a planet of living Christmas trees who see through their berries. It's one of my favorites because this is a universe that's teeming with life. The cosmos aren't empty like they are in a lot of fantasy. There's planet on planet of unique life and culture, even though we spend most of our time on Earth. There's sentient planets, there's alternate planes of existence, there's God in infinite variety. The magic is grounded in physics, but not limited by it. It's an excellent series for any teen and up who wants to feel some wonder.
Sold.
Yeah.
Quick question. Because I
Go.
have books I would put for 8 to 12-year-olds, and this seems more like a little older than that, like 12 to 15.
I would say that the protagonists are like just in like middle school, maybe starting high school.
Okay.
At the start of the series. And like sure, maybe they eventually get to the end of high school by the end of it, but like
Okay.
it's 11 books. It takes a while to get there.
So it's like maybe what I called my playground area in my Rex in the chat.
And there's an offshoot series which is about cat wizards who manage
Nice.
the interplanetary portals underneath Grand Central Station.
Wow.
That sounds fun.
So what
yeah.
it is it starts off young, but then it goes older.
It starts
as the
off. It
series
starts
goes.
off young, especially the first quartet,
Mhm.
and
Okay.
then it opens up a bit.
So like Harry Potter kind of grows up with the readers as it
Yeah,
was published.
very much that. And there's a fun mechanic in the world where the younger you are when you get your powers, the stronger you are in the power, and you eventually age out of it a bit. But with age comes experience and subtlety. So even though the older wizards might not have as much raw power, they're generally capable of quite a bit more. even if maybe they're not jetting off across the universe to like save us an exploding sun or something.
Oh my. Yeti?
Yeah, no, that just feels like something that would be right up my alley when I was a kid. Because for me, it was I always felt like I was finding stuff that didn't have enough fantastical elements. Because we didn't really have the internet was just starting, so that looks like I would just overdose on everything I love.
Yeah.
With that Yeti. Oh, did you have something?
No, go.
Kip?
I did not.
Okay. Yeti, do you want to give your rec for middle grade?
Yeah, so I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's a graphic novel called Nimona by Noelle Stevenson. And have you read it, Kip?
I have. Yeah. Love it.
It's fantastic. And so it's kind of about this big evil genius, typical evil overlord who has a sidekick who's a shapeshifter, who's Nimona. And she's, at first their relationship is just not very great. They find each other annoying, and then eventually kind of like a guarded acceptance, becoming eventually good friends. But I like the art. It's kind of different. I mean, I think you'll either love it or hate it, but the stuff it teaches, it's just incredible. Just about, and it's never heavy-handed, but about love, gay, lesbian love, just about villainy and being a hero. And it's not as very. It kind of takes. I'm not going to say grimdark, but how they say everything's not black and white. This is a great place to start to show your kid that just because they have blonde hair and superpowers and look like Superman doesn't always mean they don't have issues or are clearly unproblematic, I should say. And it's just really sweet. It's just a charming book to either let them read or read with your kid, which is something I'm looking forward to reading this. Do that, and it's just I found it very funny. I always say humor varies between people, but I don't know if Kip you found it kind of the same thing, but funny or charming. It's a good lesson.
I found it touching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I just and it's it deals with like Nimona. She's a shapeshifter, and they start doing kind of tricks, kind of bad things, which are tricks, but it moves into like vicious, like killing. So that's why I think I wouldn't put it in the age group before.
Mm-hmm.
I really loved it. I'd advise anyone to check it out.
I do have it on my bookshelf. I just haven't gotten to it, so now I'm bumping it up.
I definitely tend to think that kids are able to read books a lot earlier than a lot of people think they can. So my age recommendations are skewed in that direction a bit.
So would you say do you think Nimona would be for younger kids? Because I think it could be.
I think it could be. I think it definitely could be. Yeah.
I tried to play it safe. So,
Parents read it first, and then you can, kind of
Right,
decide.
Yeah. I don't want angry parents to yell at me. Read it. What?
Parents,
Also,
unfortunately,
Parents, read books that your kids are going to read.
You should, but you probably aren't going to be able to read all the books that your kids are.
Otherwise, you'll be like my parents, and they'll like.
Right.
you'll like hand your kid Disclosure by Michael Crichton, and not know that there's a very graphic sex scene at the start of the book.
I have another story about that sort of thing, but
Craig has a story about that.
Oh man.
So the first book I picked in this category is The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which is kind of the same place that Ella Enchanted is for you, Panda. It was my first big girl chapter book without pictures, and I read it in the 3rd grade. And Lucy is courageous, and she knows what's true, and she stands on what's true, even when everybody in her world around her is telling her that it's not true. And she gets to go through a magic portal and talk to fawns and animals. So, there's that.
Yes, and be a princess, but
Yes.
a good princess.
A good princess, yes. And she's wise and smart and, beavers and fawns.
That leads perfectly into my next recommendation. Every Heart a Doorway by Shauna McGuire and her full Wayward Children series, which is meta portal fantasy. It's like a boarding house for children who went to another world where things were magical and strange and different. It's for all the Lucys of the world who came back home and either weren't believed or wanted to find a way to get back. And they're kept up by a woman who basically had the same experience as a child and has decided to make it almost like a halfway house for children who are stuck on Earth after being sent somewhere and then sent back and were either traumatized or enhanced by the experience. It's very interesting, and even though it gets a little violent, there's like a murder mystery portion to it. It's
It's a bit
I
dark.
think it's age appropriate for like a teen. Sure.
I would give it to a 10-year-old, I think.
Yeah.
And it's so much fun. It was a really great book.
I love the concept of that. I remember when I read it, I was thinking it was one of those things where you get jealous that the author thought of it, and you're like, oh, of course.
Right?
Seriously, it's so good and it's so creative. I've only read the first one, and via audiobook, so obviously I remember nothing really of it. That's how audiobooks work for me. But yeah, I do remember it being a little violent, but it made it even better for me. Just like, ooh, here we go. But yeah,
And the
it's appropriate.
protagonist Nancy went to such a strange world to be attracted to. She went to like the halls of the dead where everything is quiet and slow and colorless.
She's almost Persephone.
And she loves it. Yeah, she's like a Persephone wannabe.
Yeah.
Except she's actually friends with Persephone.
Yeah, there's that. And I like that there's a school. I don't know if you ever visit the school, but they at least mention that there's a school for kids who went to another world who want to forget it and move on, as opposed to it's like the opposite. And it's something that's very briefly mentioned in the first.
I
two
see
chapters.
that doesn't interest me because I feel
I just
like
thought it was interesting that it existed.
that it exists. Lovely, because
Yes.
that's a concept that you see all too often, and like people telling Lucy to forget about what she saw, like it's a childhood fancy. Even some of her own siblings saying that.
Right.
Whereas, like the idea of an adult telling children to keep imagination alive, that's the kind of story I want to read.
Right.
And there's a ton of representation, all sorts of different
So
kinds.
much.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, so for my next recommendation, I have Coraline by Neil Gaiman, which is pretty popular. It's about a young girl. Her and her family moved to a new home. In the new home, there are 21 windows and 14 doors, but only 13 of the doors open and close. The 14th is locked, and on the other side is only a brick wall. Until the day Coraline unlocks the door to find a passage to another flat in another house, just like her own, but it's different. And why I recommend this is because it is about a girl who finds the courage to face her fears and learns to use her wits to problem solve. The book also touches on understanding yourself and appreciating the things you already have. The writing is very Gaiman. It's enchanting and creepy. And also, there is a film adaptation by Leica Studios, which is brilliant.
Red disagrees.
I disagree.
Oh.
I mean, it was fine. It was fine. It was not brilliant, but
You did not like the film?
it was okay.
Okay. All right.
Sorry.
That is okay. We can disagree. Okay. And then, does anybody else have another rec?
So I'm going to recommend Wrinkle in Time. First of all, Madeleine L'Engle is like one of my favorite authors. I love her. She's great. And also this is kind of a portal fantasy in a lot of ways. Portal sci-fi. So that makes like 4 of them, right? That we've recommended. And I just love that.
No, just quickly on Portal. I mean, I think it's because we recommended so many because as a kid, that's like number
Right.
one. You latch onto that immediately. Sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but there's a reason. As a kid,
Yeah, exactly. So, and I know Panda and I disagree on this book, just like I disagree on the movie with Coraline.
It's okay.
Yes.
Just a quick note on portals. Actually, the first Diane Duane book, also a portal fantasy.
Portals
I think-
everywhere.
Do we all just want to open a door and walk into a new world? I think that's probably it.
For sure.
I mean,
Yeah.
right now in 2020, yes, for sure.
Anytime, honestly. So
Especially now.
yeah, especially now. I love Meg. And I agree with Panda's assessment. She is a little whiny at sometimes. Have you ever met a 15-year-old girl? I'm just saying they can be kind of
I
whiny.
mean, yeah. They were my friends.
So, but she has to overcome that. She has to rescue her brother, who's way smarter than her, and her dad. And, she gets in fistfights to defend Charles Wallace. You got to love that.
I do
And
love
you got to
Charles
love
Wallace.
And she
Charles
has an
Wallace.
annoying teacher.
Yes. Who's also very interesting in, is it Swiftly Tilting Planet that he's in? The teacher or the principal?
Possibly. Yeah.
Anyway, also it's the Marvel universe of Le Guin books.
I think it might be a wind in the door.
Maybe it's that one. It's the one where he gets really sick.
Yeah, wind in the door, I think.
Okay. I don't know.
In our chat on Discord, you guys have sold me to read the other books in the universe, so I will give those a try. I just wasn't. I
Only
wasn't
a couple
sold.
of them. Only a couple of them.
I just wasn't sold with A Wrinkle in Time, and I mean to qualify that, I read it as an adult. I never read it as a kid, so I think part of it is just I didn't have the patience for Meg. If I read it as a kid, I probably would have related to her a lot more and enjoyed that experience more. So,
And that's a totally fair reaction. There's several books that have been recommended to me where I read them and I was like, yeah, maybe if I was 10, I would have liked this book or whatever.
yeah.
I think that was like probably my third big girl book was A Wrinkle in Time.
I have, well, I guess it's kind of portal fantasy. I don't know at this point, really. But this next one I have to recommend is the Nevermore series, which is pretty popular in the middle grade world. But the first book is called Nevermore, The Trials of Morrigan Crow. And the second book is called Wondersmith, The Calling of Morrigan Crow. They're the two books out as of now. The description for the first book, the tagline is a cursed girl escapes death and finds herself in a magical world, but is then tested beyond her wildest imagination. So Morrigan Crow was born on the unluckiest day called Eventide, and all children born on this day are considered cursed and will die on their 11th birthday. But on the eve of Morrigan's 11th birthday, she is swept away to a secret and magical city called Nevermore by a very interesting man named Jupiter North. Morrigan learns of the Wondrous Society in which Jupiter plans to have her be inducted. Who is Jupiter North? What is the Wondrous Society? Is it a good thing? A bad thing? You're going to have to read to find out. So, why I recommend the series? Because it is so fun. It has been compared to Harry Potter. I would say the content is not really similar to Harry Potter, but the feeling when you read it and the atmosphere of the book, it has some Harry Potter vibes. And honestly, don't come at me. I think it's a little better than Harry Potter, at least with the first two books. The author Jessica Townsend, she's Australian author. She writes tighter stories and great world building. And I am so looking forward to the third book, Hollowpox: The Hunt for Morrigan Crow, which releases October 15th of this year. I'm curious, have you guys heard of the series?
Heard of it, yes, but not much.
Yeti?
I've never heard of it. I'll say two things. One, I think we're going to get death threats from Harry Potter fans. Thanks to you.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. I love it. But two, you sold me on it. That sounded awesome. Genuinely. Probably going
And
to get it
also
on
kind
Audible.
of portal.
Yeah.
And also Harry Potter's kind of a portal fantasy too.
They literally go through this brick wall.
I'm not okay calling Harry Potter portal fantasy, but I'm okay calling it an allegory for portal fantasy.
Yeah, I would agree.
They
Yeah.
have a portal key. They have a boot. That's a key. That's a
But
portal.
They
they're
have
still in the same
teleportation, sure.
world.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're still in the same world of, yeah. So,
There's just
but
like a
yes,
barrier between them.
I highly, highly
A
recommend the
cultural
series.
barrier.
Yeah, so if you do read it, let me know what you think. Okay, and then do I have another one? Nope, that's it.
I have one more that I can kind of fit into this category before we move on in
Sure.
this episode and move on to the next. So I would recommend Dealing with Dragons by Patricia Reed. It came out in 2000, I want to say. And it's a really fun retelling of a princess who's kidnapped by a dragon. Except she's not kidnapped by a dragon. She runs away to get away from her family. And the only thing she knows how to cook is Cherry's Jubilee. Because that's all she learned how to cook before she got kicked out of the kitchen for trying to learn something that was not princessy enough. And it's really funny. And there's 4 books, I want to say, in the series. But they're very clever and they age very well because I read it again in my 20s. And you actually get more out of them when you're older, but you could totally read it at like 12 for sure.
Is it like adventure fantasy? Would you say like after she escapes the dragon? No spoilers, please.
No. It's kind of it's more of a turning a fairy tale on its head type of story. Definitely some adventure, but it's more like, so she runs away to go live with the dragons, and princes keep trying to rescue her, and she keeps sending them away. It's kind of that's probably the first 3 chapters that's going on. So
Yeah, I think the series is called, is it the Enchanted Forest Chronicles?
yeah, it is something like that.
Yeah, they're fun.
And the wizards melt if you throw soapy water on them.
Yeah.
And there's also cats in that one too.
Sounds good. I'll put it on the TBR. Though if I read it to my daughter and she thinks that soapy water is gonna make her melt now, I'm gonna have to blame you.
No, it's wizards. Your daughter's not a wizard.
Yeah, well, I don't know.
What if
Maybe
she
she wants to be a wizard. Yeah. What
What
if she reads So You Want to Be a Wizard first?
Oh, heck breaks loose. She never takes a
she's-
bath again.
And she swears the oath to do the one service for all life.
Well, Yeti's gonna have to keep us up to date on how that goes.
So that concludes our recommendations for the middle grade category. The last category, it'll be really quick. It's just for the preteens, early teens, and I'll give my 2 recommendations. This one is Beauty by Robin McKinley, and this is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. The main character, Beauty, is introverted, has low self-esteem, and dislikes her physical appearance. Having 2 very attractive and kind sisters doesn't help as much in her self-esteem. But Beauty is a clever girl, and she willingly becomes the Beast's prisoner to fulfill her father's promise to the Beast. So why I recommend this book is because, well, even though there's not a shortage of Beauty and the Beast retellings, Beauty stood out to me as a young girl because of the depth we get in understanding Beauty as a person and her family dynamics. Beauty's sisters are not evil or mean to Beauty. This story shows a loving family environment and how a young woman has the courage to protect her family and grow to love herself. I remember the writing to be very pretty. It is a slower moving book. The first half is spent with the family and getting to know them. And I do think that if you like Ella Enchanted, I think you'll like Beauty. And the last recommendation I have in this category is East by Edith Pateau. In the UK, this book actually has a different title. It's called Northchild. This is a retelling of the Norwegian folktale East of the Sun and West of the Moon. Rose is a special girl. Despite her superstitious mother's efforts to keep Rose home, she decides to trade her freedom for her family's health and prosperity when an enormous white bear appears at her family home. Traveling on the bear's back, Rose is carried off to a very distant and empty castle where there is a mystery to solve. And why I recommend this is that it is a lesser known tale. Rose grows up a lot between the beginning and the end of the book. She shows perseverance and remains her own person throughout the book. There is a bit of romance, but not in the typical tropey way. And the writing is also very, very beautiful. So those are all the recommendations for this episode. Any last bit of thoughts that people have before we close out?
Just to reiterate, I guess what Red and I guess everyone said is kind of don't be scared to give your child something to read that you don't think is appropriate, or above their age group. I mean, I know we cut this up into 8 different ages, but I really do think you can interchange all of them at different ages, especially depending on the kid. I don't think you're going to scar any kid because they read a book 3 years too early, So
Yeah. I think the worst thing you can do to a kid with a recommendation is give them a book that they personally are not ready to finish. I think that's the worst thing. Then they get discouraged and they maybe think, oh, maybe I'm not ready. Maybe fantasy isn't something I enjoy. Maybe I'll just stick to what I know. And really, that's the worst thing you could do with a recommendation is give someone a book that they don't enjoy. And so really try and tailor things, try and recommend things that you know, or that has things in common with someone that they like. It goes back to a general recommendation guidelines, but I don't think that for any age group of child there exists books which nobody in that age group can understand or value.
And I just want to add, if you have a book that you think might be a little bit too old for them, I read to my kids until they were like 12 and 11, and just reading
Mhm.
with them. Like, I wouldn't hand a 8-year-old The Hobbit, but I would read The Hobbit to an 8-year-old. If that makes sense.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Because then you're on hand to explain things if they have questions.
Yeah.
And it's a good, bonding moment.
Oh, I do miss that, I gotta say. I miss reading with my kids.
I mean, you can still read to your kids. No one's stopping you, except your kids.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's the problem there.
I don't think number 1 and number 2 want me to read them stuff. Except for
Yeah.
maybe All My Friends Have Died, which is a hilarious picture book that you should not share with your child.
Oh goodness.
Oh, goodness.
And with that, we will conclude this episode. So join us in the other episode for our female protagonist recommendations for older teens through adults. We want to give a shout out to our producer and editor, Horizon Brave. If there are any recommendations we missed or you want to yell at us about any of the things we said, please join us over at the Legendarium Discord server. You can find the link on Reddit at r/thelegendarium. If you would like to join us in these podcasts, then become a patron of the Legendarium podcast. Thank you to our panelists, Yeti Beats, Kipton, and Little Red Book. I'm Befuddled Panda, and until next time, bye.
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 Yeah.